Not on the committee? Okay.
We need Anna, Mariana, or Louise.
Okay. Well, we don't have any action items, I don't believe. So we could begin the meeting as a committee of the whole. Receive update, and receive report. So it's a lot of receiving. Let's give it a few minutes to see if someone shows. Otherwise, it goes to Mr. Pacheco as the vice chair. If you want to make the call, Dave, whether we start now.
You're in charge.
I'm not, oh, no. Pin that on me.
It's a short agenda, isn't it? Well,
Yeah, those are the ones that take the longest. Then here we are. There's one. That, we have a quorum.
Like I was on the road for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. Do you hit traffic? Yes. Yeah.
Oh, highways just between Salinas and here in the mornings.
Oh,
Terrible.
yeah, right.
And I imagine between South County and Salinas isn't too hot either.
Yeah, it's just like.
No,
we need a flyover path.
we're starting to have new staff that's able to commute. They just from Salinas to here, it's just too much for them.
Yeah.
I think there was a rapid.
That's what I was thinking.
Crazy talk.
Like, my goodness, how do
about that at 10 o'clock today.
how do people do this every day? It's just like frustrating. Like, it's just like, I'm getting my computer, apologize for that.
No worries.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order at 9:02, and this is the Board Administrative Performance Committee meeting of July 8th of 2024. And I believe we have, if we can do a roll call, please.
City of Del Rio. Here. City of Greenfield. City of Monterey.
Here.
City of Seaside.
Here.
City of Soledad.
Here.
And County of Monterey. We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll move on to our next item on our agenda, which is item 4-2, receive state legislative advocacy update, and we have the update being provided to us by Michelle Overmeyer and Matt Robinson and Mr. Michael Pimentel, and that is.
We
Oh,
did
Chair,
skip.
we need to do
Yeah.
Did I skip
Yeah.
public comments? Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, let me go back.
You want a paper?
No, you know, I have it here, but let me hide my sidebar. Maybe that's what's Oh, yes. Yes, I had it on my sidebar, so public comments, yes, thank you. So members of the public may address the committee on any matters that are related to the jurisdiction of MST, but not on the agenda. So there is a time limit of 3 minutes for each speaker. So again, the public is encouraged to engage in respectful dialogue and that encourages freedom of speech and values of diversity of opinion. Failure to engage in respectful dialogue will result in speakers being muted or required to leave. And the committee, as you all know, will not take any action, respond immediately to any of the public comments that are being presented, but we'll choose to follow up at a later time individually or through each of the individual staff members. So at this time, do we have any members of the public that are joining us here in the boardroom that like to make any public comments? And if you can please come up to the dais if you're able to do so. Okay, seeing none, then I will take it out to those that are joining us via Zoom. Any members of the public that are joining us via Zoom, if you can please raise your hand so we can acknowledge you and unmute you. Okay, seeing none, then I will close the public comment period. And then I will go into item 3, and that is our consent agenda. So we do have item 3-1, approve the minutes of the board administrative performance of committee of July 8th, 2024, and that's on page 5 of our committee packet. So I can entertain a motion for approval of the minutes of July 8th.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, then motion carries unanimously. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is now the action items. So now we go into item 4-1, review of administrative performance. And that's administrative performance and this is referred to the MST board agenda item 7-1, and that's on page 113 of our packet. And I will turn this over to our CEO, Mr. Carl Sidora.
Thank you, Chair. We are reporting this month our fiscal year-end results in our packet. And I'm pleased to report that compared to last year, fiscal year 24, we had a 24.6% increase in fixed route passenger boardings over the previous year, closing in on 3 million passenger boardings for the year when you total up the MST rides, taxi vouchers, van pool, and trips, the volunteer trips. Our MST rides performance, we had a 10% increase over the previous year. And then in the taxi vouchers, there's a 16% increase in the use of taxi vouchers for the year, as well as a 30% increase in the use of the volunteer trips. So we are, really rebounding back and carrying a lot more people. You can look through the report and you be happy to answer any questions, but our safety statistics, on-time performance statistics, and everything else is operating within standard. We did implement a new service change last weekend before last, over Labor Day weekend, adding back services for the support the community colleges, CSUMB, and Hartnell's services. We also added some new services, rerouting some services through the city of Marina per some requests from the community there. Also, we have had during the past month several meetings with the administration of Rancho Cielo, and we're looking to develop some commute hour service for their students, maybe a bus in the morning and a bus in the evening, because they have now up to 300 students, faculty, and staff at that location. And many of them, the vast majority of them, live in our targeted disadvantaged communities, really meet our target market really well. And it's a difficult location to serve because it's so remote. So it's not a type of service that I don't know that we'll ever have regular ongoing service throughout the day. But we do think it makes sense to provide some services out there to get folks to their school and training, and then back in the evening as well. And they also have some housing there for visiting workers. Farm workers also stay at that campus as well throughout the summertime and various points throughout the year. So it would be a useful benefit to those temporary residents to have access to transit to get them to grocery, medical. Currently, they're having to pool money for Ubers or taxi cabs, and it's very, very expensive for them. So we're looking forward to kicking something off later this year. We're working out locations of bus stops and routing to make certain that we can navigate in and out of there safely. But looking forward to a partnership with them because they, our constituencies overlap quite a bit. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, Carl. Let me open it up. Let me open it up to the public to see if there's any comments or questions, and then I'll bring it back to our board, our directors. Any questions from the public on questions on the report on item 4-1 from those that are joining us here in our boardroom? Okay, seeing none, then any questions or comments from those that are joining us via Zoom? Okay, seeing none, then directors, any questions or comments on item 4-1? Okay. No, Carl, I just want to say thank you. I know that we're seeing some of the numbers go up, and thank you for mentioning Rancho Cielo. I know that there were some, we've had discussions with them in the past in terms of how do we support them. And I know obviously the location is very, very remote and it's been really difficult, but I know in the past they've had, we've had conversations about how we try to service them. And so I'm glad that we have ongoing dialogues on what's the best way, especially as their numbers increase also, and they service a lot more youth, and they're doing a lot more an expansion of their services to that age as well, in terms of that group of youth that they're supporting, and how do we also support. And I know we provided support also when they went to Orange County and worked with Orange County Transit to be able to support them while they were there. So thank you for doing that as well. So I look forward to how we can partner with them.
Yeah, historically, they've been a regular recipient of the donated vehicles that we provide at a very low cost to nonprofits. The issue is, though, then they have to find drivers and maintain the vehicles, which are the same difficulties that we have finding drivers and mechanics. So they've hit a critical mass. They're large enough now that makes more sense for us to reach them with a bus than perhaps when they only had 100 students out there. It wasn't. But now they're at 300. It's starting to make more sense. They're starting to offer driver's license and driver's training to folks, and which is great for them, but it's also, though, it's maybe an unanticipated cost that these folks will have. They'll have the driver's license, but then there may be some sticker shock coming later when they actually get a car and have to maintain it and insure it and fuel it. And perhaps they can use the bus a little bit more until they're employed and can better afford the costs of personal transportation.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, so with that, then we'll move on to item 4-2, receive state legislative advocacy update. And then, so this, I will turn it over to Michelle Overmeyer, Matt Robinson, and Mr. Michael Pimentel with the report that we have on page 127 of our regular packet. So I will turn it over to Michelle.
Good morning, committee members. Michelle Overmeyer, Director of Planning and Innovation. Yes, item 7-3 of your full agenda package has the written staff report, and we have Michael Pimentel and Matt Robinson with us from Sacramento to talk about what's been going on the last few weeks.
Thank you, Michelle, and good morning, everyone, and thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Robinson with Shaw Yitter and Tui Schmelzer and Lang. I think everybody knows this, but the system keeps us off camera. And that's unfortunate because Michael and I both wore tuxedos today to present to you. So you'll just have to picture that in your heads. Let me begin by just noting that the legislature wrapped up the final year of the 2-year session, the 23-24 legislative session on Saturday. Well, technically, I guess it was Sunday morning, September 1st. The final day was August 31st. However, they leaked a little bit into Sunday morning, I think wrapping up around 12:30 a.m. Your legislative advocacy team was here for all of it. It was a pretty busy final week of session. There were a number of sort of last minute pushes that you've probably read about in the papers related to trying to help reduce the cost of gasoline in the state, lowering utility bills, et cetera, et cetera. Some of those will have to wait until either later this year or when the legislature comes back next year. There has been some rumors of whether or not they're actually going to come back for a special session. The Assembly did gavel into a special session on the gas price issue at the request of the governor. The Senate has not. And since then, there's been some back and forth in the news about why that's happened. But we will have to see if in the next few weeks both houses are willing to reconvene and try and move some legislation on gas prices down to help alleviate the cost of gasoline to the governor. It really revolves around how much sort of additional capacity the refineries need to keep in order to avoid those refinery shutdowns that tend to raise the price, particularly here in California. And so we'll have to see if something materializes between now and Election Day. But if not, we fully expect the bodies to take up those issues when they come back for the new session. And speaking of that, there is an election on November 5th. I'm sure you are all well aware. After that, the new class of legislators will gavel in for what will be the 25-26 session on December 2nd. We may see some bills introduced. We'll have new members taking their oath of office, and then they head back to the districts and they will convene in earnest in early January, really to begin the work. We expect bill introductions to be sort of due sometime in mid-February. And as you all are familiar, we've had a lot of spot bills that tend to come into print for the early months of session that ultimately get substance or don't. And we'll be reporting more on that as we look towards the next legislative session. There are a few bills that are on the governor's desk awaiting action that MST has been supportive of this year, including SB 960 by Senator Wiener, which would require Caltrans, as it plans its projects on the state highway system, to incorporate more transit priority and complete streets projects, as well as try to provide some additional help in getting transit projects approved through Caltrans when permitting is required. There is a bill, SB 1420 by Senator Caballero, which will make it easier to build hydrogen production and storage facilities in the state of California if it's signed by the governor. And then finally, there was a CEQA bill that we were tracking, AB 2503, only because, we always watch the CEQA exemption process for transit projects. MST has been the beneficiary of that on the SURF project. That bill's also on the governor's desk awaiting action. And we've included a number of others in the board report that we're happy to take questions on. We also note in the board report the final ballot that you all will be looking at as far as statewide propositions go between now and November 5th. I think probably the two biggest things that we'd want to mention are Proposition 5. We have supported what was Assembly Constitutional Amendment 1 for a couple of years now. And that is on the ballot as Prop 5. Though one thing we should note, and we have included this in recent board reports, is that ACA 10 came along and cut back a lot of the provisions that were in the original ACA 1 that we all, I think, supported. And that included having the lower vote threshold for transit and transportation infrastructure. Say if you were going to run another special tax, it would make that only require a 55% vote threshold. Now, what we're left with is essentially the ability for local agencies to issue bonds backed by ad valorem property taxes at that lower vote threshold. While that may help benefit some housing creation throughout the state, there isn't a lot there for the public transit and the transportation agencies. And so that is on the ballot. We will see what the voters decide to do with it come November 5th, or maybe 30 days or so after that, the way things have been going lately, but more to come. And then the other one I would just call your attention to is Prop 36. That's the Proposition 47 sort of restructuring bill. That's been a big one debated here in Sacramento with the governor and some leadership in the legislature opposed to that, but a lot of local mayors and law enforcement supporting it. And that would increase some of the penalties for theft and drug possession. It would also provide the opportunity for the courts to send folks to rehabilitation facilities in lieu of prison. So we will see how that does on the ballot come later this year. And then finally, I just wanted to note, what we've been doing in probably recent months, if not the entire year, is working with Carl, Michelle, Lisa, and the team down there, trying to help as best we can on the SURF project, spending a lot of time with your delegation, getting them involved, staying involved. And I think, our efforts are paying off, and Carl will have updates for you all on that. But it's been an interesting road getting to where we are, but we do appreciate being able to help MST where we can on that. I'm going to hand it to Michael Pimentel now, Madam Chair. He'll give you a quick update on the Transit Transformation Task Force, and then try to predict as best he can is what we're looking at as far as transit's concerned when the governor comes out with his budget in January.
Yeah, and
Thank
thank
you,
you. Thank you, Matt, and Madam Chair and members. Good to be with you this morning. As Matt noted, I do want to give you just a brief update on the Transit Transformation Task Force and highlight for you that this body that was established under SB 125 as part of the accountability and reform requirements for public transit agencies to receive what is ultimately going to be $5.1 billion in funding for capital and operations does continue to move forward. On August 29th, the task force met for the 5th time, and it was the second of so far 2 meetings that have focused on what the state has referred to as policy enablers. And frankly, that's legislative changes, regulatory changes, funding changes to help public transit move forward on a variety of priority topic areas. The focus of the meeting on August 29th was workforce, that is inclusive of recruitment, retention, and development, as well as TDA reform. Now, working through the California Transit Association, Monterey Salinas Transit has helped inform the priorities that are brought to the table for that task force meeting by the transit industry, and has worked to put forward a series of recommendations that we were able to speak to at that meeting, and that have been shared with CalSTA as CalSTA works to ultimately develop a report of recommendations to the legislature that may become new legislation, may become new budget actions. That report is required to be submitted to the legislature by October 31st, 2025, which would mean that we would see new legislation introduced potentially in early 2026. And so it's a good opportunity for the industry and individual agencies to ultimately influence the direction of public transit in the state and make sure that the agencies continue to evolve, continue to make improvements on their services to ultimately reach what the state is interested in, which is operational and financial stability moving forward. And so I mentioned that this task force, again, created under SB 125, I think often most notably what was provided for with 125 was the structure of investment in public transit to help address the fiscal cliff that many agencies across the state were facing, but also to help deliver major capital projects. And so you will recall that this total investment is, again, $5.1 billion. It's inclusive of 2 parts, $4 billion for the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, but in a distinct way, a formula aspect of that program, as well as $1.1 billion for the formula-based zero-emission transit capital program. Now, under this current budget, and I should say in the lead up to this budget for the fiscal year 24-25, there was a bit of a snag, and it was something that MST was directly engaged on in helping to dislodge when we saw that the state instituted a state spending freeze, impacting all discretionary investments, including the SB 125 investments. At that time, we had seen roughly $2.4 billion being frozen by the state as they reviewed the budget capacities that they had to address a $50 billion 2-year budget shortfall. Ultimately, the transit funding was preserved in that fiscal year 24-25 budget, But what they did is they made some changes to the appropriation timeline for that investment. The larger portion of that 5.1 again is comprised of $4 billion for TIRCP. The major change that they made there was to move that program from a 2-year program of a $2 billion investment in fiscal year 23-24 to a $2 billion investment in fiscal year 24-25. It made it instead the preservation of that first $2 billion for fiscal year 23-24, and then two $1 billion appropriations, one made in fiscal year 24-25, and the other to be made in fiscal year 25-26. And so as we look out ahead and we consider what budget actions may be on the table as legislature developing the fiscal year 25-26 budget, much of the focus, much of the attention is going to be on making sure that that commitment for that remaining $1 billion for the TIRCP ultimately moves forward. Now, at this stage, some of the circumstances that may support that moving forward without as much complication as we saw this year was the fact that the legislature took action on what became a 2-year budget, capturing really the budget deficits for fiscal year 24-25 and fiscal year 25-26. What that does not speak to, though, is changes in their budget projections. So if certainly the revenue collection comes in less than was anticipated, there may still be some budget deficit to address. That would likely come from discretionary investments, which could, again, put transit funding on the table. So the industry, through the Transit Association, through individual agencies, will be mobilizing at the start of next year to tell a story about what these investments are doing for regions across the state, why it's important for the legislature and the administration to move forward with protecting those dollars, making sure that the full balance of the $5.1 billion is approved. And so I'll stop there and take any questions or comments that folks may have.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for that information. So let me take it out to the public first, and then I'll come back to the directors in case for any questions. So any members of the public that are joining us here in our chambers have any questions on the information that was presented? Okay, then let me take it out to those that are joining us via Zoom. Okay, seeing no questions, and I'll bring it back to the directors. Any questions from the directors on the information presented? Okay, seeing no questions. Well, thank you so much. I think there's a lot of information and, being aware of some of the budget deficits and a lot of the work that's been done to secure some of the current funding. And we look forward to, making sure that some of the money that was secured during this budget cycle, that we have those commitments and that we continue to look forward to ensuring that those dollars are secured for transit for the next budget cycle. So thank you for the work that's been done.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate it, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, then we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is our receive then our federal legislative update, and then I will turn this over to Carl Sadoric, and then we also have Don. I think I did see Don Gilchrist.
Don Gilchrist is
Gilchrist, thank you.
our representative in the Capitol.
Yes, and then our packet on the federal legislative update is on page 125 of our regular MST packet.
I'm going to just turn it over to Don. Take it away, sir.
Okay, there, I finally unmuted myself. Good morning, everyone, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again. And this is Don Gilchrist with Thomas Walters and Associates. And I appreciate the help of the staff to project a few slides to kind of guide my presentation this morning. If we could advance to the next slide. Just want to say that Congress is back in town after a long break for the August recess, which stretched into September a little bit. And there's just a long list of things that have to be done before the end of the year. But especially the focus is on finishing up the FY25 funding bills, with the most pressing issue of getting something enacted before October 1 that would prevent a government shutdown. That's when the new fiscal year starts. So we have to have something signed into law. It won't be the 12 annual appropriations bills that are really kind of stuck. The House has passed 5 of them, 5 of the 12, and the Senate has not passed any of them. So there's no prospect of getting those finished by October 1, which makes us want to see something happen in a continuing resolution that will provide interim funding. That will be the focus in the next weeks, with Speaker Johnson bringing something to the floor this week in the House that will be sort of the opening bid or the opening round. The House Republicans are proposing a 6-month continuing resolution that will extend current funding levels through March. And they're pairing it with a controversial immigration measure that is intended to prevent non-citizens from voting in federal elections. That's controversial. The Democrats are not supporting the legislation because they say federal law already addresses that. So this is a bit of a sticking point, but it is a non-starter for the other side of the aisle. And we're not even sure if the House Republicans will be able to get this through the House this week. We're going to watch that very closely. They have very tight margins in the House. So if they have any defections, they could run into trouble pretty quick. If that does pass the House, it will go over to the Senate. The Senate will take it up and amend it and send it back in a very different form. And Senate Majority Leader Schumer is not showing all of his cards yet. Will it be the same length? We don't know that yet. Will there be other things added that are not added? They're definitely going to take out this voting measure before they send it back to the House. So we got a long way to go on that. It's not out of the question that we could come to the brink of a government shutdown, but most people seem to want to just finish up and get out of town and go home and campaign. There is this general sense of dysfunction in the federal budget process because of the impasse over what the overall spending levels will be. But I always like to point out that the bipartisan infrastructure law does provide a measure of protection for MST through the transportation funding that was included in that legislation. This is a significant amount of funding for transit formula programs and also grant opportunities that MST can apply for. So far, that funding has not been impacted by the overall fights that are going on in the annual appropriations process. And as has been mentioned, the SURF project has been a major part of our advocacy this year at the state level and at the federal level. And I just want to say Mr. Sidorik and his staff have put in enormous amount of work on obtaining a small starts grant agreement with FTA. We're hoping to see that happen this fall, and we'll be continuing to work on that throughout the coming months. If we could advance to the next slide, please. I just want to show you kind of a snapshot of where we're at with the transportation funding bill. This is one of the 12. It won't move because of the overall disagreements over the big picture, but this will give you a sense of how it could impact MST. I've included 2 years of enacted bills so you can see the trends in transportation funding. Since FY23, some of the grant programs that are funded through the transportation funding bill have had reduced funding, and the House Republicans are seeking to continue to reduce that funding for FY25. The Senate is resisting that. The White House is against it. It seems likely that they may end up splitting the difference again. We're advocating for as much of this funding as possible to maintain these as additional grant opportunities for MST. And again, I want to stress this does not affect the infrastructure funding, which also provided funding for most of these programs. But for transit, the Capital Investment Grants Program is under attack. For bus and bus facilities, we've sought to increase that funding through general fund supplements and the House Republicans are continuing to oppose that. But by and large, there's a lot of funding for both of those programs that is available one way or the other because of the infrastructure law. These are still worth fighting for, and we'll continue to work to obtain this funding. I just want to say your local delegation in the House and the Senate has been very active on this front, and they're wonderful to work with, and they're doing everything they can, at least, to work in this dysfunctional environment. So the next slide, please. This just summarizes the appropriations issues that I think MST should be focused on and that we're focusing on as part of our lobbying. And ultimately, we want to see a full year bill get enacted for the Transportation Department. This is important for FTA to be able to make apportionments of their formula funding. If they get a 6-month continuing resolution, that should allow them to do a partial year, but that's something we always have to pay attention to, because if they can't make a partial year apportionment, then you could have cash flow issues with your federal money. There is a project pending in the Senate bill that is important for you. This is $1 million that Senators Padilla and Butler were able to obtain for the King City facility hydrogen retrofits. This reflects a lot of lobbying by Mr. Sidorik and his staff over the year, and we're very, very happy to have this support from the senators. We need to see the transportation bill get enacted in order for this project to be funded. So that is another thing to keep an eye on. Continue to oppose the House budget cuts. Want to protect the infrastructure formula funding and grant opportunities. And if there is any way to add a general fund supplement to some of these programs, especially in the bus and bus facilities accounts, we'll continue to work on that. However, the pressing issue is just keep the government open, get a continuing resolution signed into law. They will probably come back after the election for a lame duck session, but that, of course, could be impacted by the length of the CR. If it's a 6-month CR, it sort of reduces the pressure to come back after the election. So lots of things moving. On the federal level, bipartisan deals can fall into place very, very quickly at the last minute. So we're not going to take our eye off the ball at all. We continue to work on all these things right through September and into the fall. But that's a summary of where we stand on the federal level, and be happy to respond to any questions or comments that the committee has. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Don, for the update. And thank you so much also for the presentation on the slides and the report as well. So let me take it out to the public to see if there's any comments or questions from the members of the public that are joining us here in our chambers, in our boardroom. Any members of the public that are joining us here in our boardroom? Okay, seeing none, then any of those that are joining us via Zoom? Okay, seeing none, then I'll bring it back to the directors if there's any questions, directors, or comments.
Statement.
Statement.
What a way to run a place.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you figure out a pathway and priorities? So, well, we stand and wait. We wait to see how it comes together and carefully watch.
Yeah. No, thank you, Don. And I have to say, I was in, I was listening to the presentation and saying, I worked for the city of Salinas about 20 years ago, and I know the city of Salinas is an entitlement community, and I worked in housing where we administered all of the federal funds that came to the city. And I know every year it was waiting for the federal government to see if they came to an agreement. And for a lot of us that were paid with federal funding, it was always in that anticipation whether we would have a job or not, right? So there was a lot at stake, and just a lot of that hasn't changed. And obviously there's a lot at stake with people's jobs and a lot of these projects moving forward. So we hope that at some point it does change, because there's a lot at stake, not just, it's obviously people's livelihood, but also a lot of the projects, and trying to make sure that our country runs effectively and a lot of what we do. And so anyhow, a lot
Yeah.
of us is the projects that we have moving forward as well. And so I just want to say thank you to our team at MST that has really pushed forward the projects that we have before us with the hydrogen project and also the SURF project that are really critical, and a lot of work has been done. So we hope that these projects can move forward and that there is some resolution at the federal level to move the funding forward, so that way we can move forward with the projects.
So may I? So just to draw your attention, on page 51 is our cash flow. In years past, pre-COVID, these long-term continuing resolutions or lack of a continuing resolution had created significant cash flow problems for MST in the past. So to the effect where we had to look at reducing service or reducing positions. That is no longer the case. Over the past several years, we've worked really hard at making certain that our minimum, if you look at page 51 of your packet, of the monthly report packet, you see the line at about the $10 million mark. That is what we generally receive each year in a federal funding. So your board adopted a policy of us holding about that much in cash should we have a long-term funding agreement. We currently have close to $50 million in cash. So we can withstand a pretty long-term level of dysfunction and still be able to meet our obligations to our employees, to our suppliers, to the community. So while there is trouble and dysfunction at the federal level and sometimes at the state level as well, we're well positioned from a financial perspective to withstand that.
Well, thank you, Carl, for that statement. I'm glad that we've had made adjustments to that, but nonetheless, right? I mean,
Yeah, we prefer not to hold up.
prefer not to.
We prefer not to. But just in
Absolutely.
case, we've learned through very difficult experience that if we're not prepared, we can run into some pretty rocky times. And so I swore that would never happen again, and it doesn't look like it's gonna.
Well, thank you. So we have two more items, so let's move on to our next item. So thank you so much for all
Thank you.
also from our legislative representatives at the state and the federal level.
Here's this,
Done.
thank you.
Oh, he said thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Don. So we'll move on to item 4-4, receive Public Employees Pension Reform Act from PEPRA in 2013. And this is an update from our CEO, Mr. Sidorik.
So we have, let's just say, here we go again. Back in 2012, there was a change in our state pension reform for employees like MST. And that basically changed the pension plan for new employees that would be coming in after a certain date in time, and placed some caps on some of the pension benefits. Many of I think all of your cities went through the same. The nuance was in the federal code, there is a opportunity for the Department of Labor to weigh in on whether a grant is actually released to a recipient like MST, and they have to certify that collective bargaining has occurred fairly and equitably. And there was a case brought against MST and the state of California, who was the managing the grant for MST, as well as Sacramento RTA. Ultimately, it was several years later found in our favor that, in fact, that the implementation of PEPRA did not violate the collective bargaining rights of employees. It came after a challenge and a withholding of funds to MST, and it led to us at that time actually having to issue layoff notices to employees because it was going to impact our actual federal operating funds. Ultimately, we agreed to a settlement that we would not withhold funds until the courts ruled on this. The courts ruled ultimately in our favor. Under the Trump administration, declined to appeal, and the law for Monterey, Salinas Transit, and Sacramento RTA is settled. However, for the rest of the state, who wasn't part of that initial lawsuit, was subject to these claims of unfair bargaining with related to PEPRA. So Los Angeles and San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Stockton, transit operators from all around the state were subject to a potential withholding of funds. A lawsuit was filed. It was found in favor of all the other state agencies that PEPRA did in fact not violate collective bargaining units. The Biden administration did appeal. Upon appeal, it was found that the original court erred in making a ruling before it was judicially ripe, which means that rather than waiting for funds to be challenged and withheld, the courts were preempted that from occurring. The appeals court said, no, you can't do that. You have to wait until an actual harm is incurred, like it occurred with MST, where we actually were not receiving our funding and we had to issue layoff notices. So the appeals court overturned the Eastern District Court of California's ruling for the rest of the state. And so they're all at it. They're going at it again, trying to figure out a way through this. But just to let you know, in case you see news stories about it, there will be some news stories probably showing up with billions of dollars at stake throughout the state of California. MST and Sacramento RT are forever held. We don't have to worry about this. We have our cases settled. We're the only ones in the state that it's settled for. It was difficult to go through in 2012-13, but it ultimately is now working to our favor. I just want to let you know that this issue has raised its head again and will be going on. And there, you may see some things in various journals, Cal Matters, or those wonky type of journals that focus on transportation. If you see that, no worries about MST. Our money is safe. So just wanted to give you that. There is a task force at the state level that Kelly Helkin and I are members of. Only that, even though we're not impacted financially, we're kind of the historians of it because we were in it, as was Michael and Dave Laredo, as our attorneys were very in-depthly involved with this. So we kind of know how we successfully navigated that. So we've been asked to participate in this task force to provide our counsel on how the rest of the state might reach a similar outcome.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Carl, for letting us know so we don't forget about it.
Yeah, it was pretty fraught time.
Yeah, thank you. So any members, let me just take it out to the public if there's any questions or comments from the public. Okay, from those that are joining us via Zoom. Okay, from any of our directors. Okay, thank you for that report. So let's move on to our last item on our agenda, item 4-5, receive a preliminary unaudited fiscal year 2024 year-end financial report. And I will turn it over to Ms. Lisa Reinheimer.
Yes, thank you. Lisa Reinheimer, Deputy CEO for MST. And I have some good news to report. As of the end of last fiscal year, we had a $61.1 million surplus. It is a little bit less than what we had experienced in previous years. We had $7.7 million. So the 61.1 is a total surplus. It adds all the surpluses from this past fiscal year and previous fiscal years. So in 2024, we had a $7.7 million surplus added to an $11.4 million surplus from 23 added to, et cetera, et cetera. So that's good news. We are seeing a decline in the surplus available to us from previous fiscal years. So it's I'm going to throw a bunch of numbers at you and you can ask me about them later. $3.6 million less than the previous fiscal year. And so we are seeing that surplus declining, partly because we are more fully staffed with our coach operators. And of course, delivering service requires people to drive buses and additional fuel and vehicle operating hours. The other good news I wanted to report is that we are seeing some nice return on investments in our money market account. We have two primary locations. One is our investment account, which goes through the state, through the local agency investment fund, and we're getting quarterly on that 4.55%. We have about just under $30 million in that account. And then we also have a money market account through our bank, Mechanics Bank, and we're getting 4.7% on that one as well. It's about 20 million, something along those lines. So all in all, financially, we're doing really, really well. I do want to track this surplus to budget over the next coming years as we're fully staffed and see how it goes. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. We'll have a final audit later on this year that we'll we'll give to the board as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for the report. And then I know more detailed financial report is in our packet as well. So thank you for that. So let me take it out to the public. If there's any members of the public that have any comments or questions on item 4-5. Okay, and then let me see if those that are joining us via Zoom, any questions from those that are joining us via Zoom? Okay, seeing none, then I'll bring it back to the directors if there's any questions on item 4-5. Okay, seeing no questions or comments on item 4-5. Thank you so much. So with that, then if there's no other items of business, then we will adjourn this. Oh, we don't have any closed sessions, and with that, then we will adjourn our meeting for today, and our next scheduled meeting is November 4th at 9 o'clock. So thank you so much.